Hello and welcome to The Game Changers. I'm Sue Anstis and this is the podcast where you'll hear from trailblazing women in sport. A big thank you to Barclays for supporting this series of The Game Changers, which will feature fearless women in football. My guest today is Gail Newsham, author of In a League of Their Own and an expert on the remarkable story of the Kerr Ladies. I began by asking Gail about her own life growing up.
I was born in 1953, grew up in a dilapidated 2-up, 2-down terraced house with an immediate love of football. I don't know, I used to play football at street with lads and you can never find me very far without a football by my feet. And left school at 15, went to work in a shoe factory, joined the army in 1974 and worked for the local council when I came home, and I organised this reunion of the Kerr Ladies, and that changed my life. And I just, they've become such a big part of my life that I just spend all my time now really doing things about them. So it keeps me off streets. So, yeah, I'm not an academic or anything like that. I'm just an ordinary lass, and I just love football. I played myself when I was younger, of course, when I could first play in a women's football team. And I just love the game, and I've always done as much as I ever could to promote it. When I was playing, I was also an officer on the league management committee. So I did all of that with no computers in those days, as well. It was all done by hand and whatever. So I was always busy, training twice a week, playing football on a Sunday, running the league as well, organising an international women's football tournament in the summer. Teams from all over Europe came to that as well. It was an amazing thing, and people still remember it today with such love and affection, and that makes me feel very proud.
And so where did your love start? You talk love of football start. You talk about playing yourself, and you played for Peter Craig Ladies and Preston Ladies, I believe.
That's right,
as well.
Preston Rangers, yeah.
And you played in two FA Cup semi-finals. So a little bit about your history would be good in terms of your playing. Why do you think you had such a love for the game?
I don't know. It's just, I think things like that are born in you, aren't they? You can't, it's just how it is. Some people they want to play the guitar, or I only ever wanted to play football. But of course, we had no role models. But, I was so dedicated. Honestly, I absolutely lived, breathed, ate football. I was just so dedicated. And I look at them today and I wish we would have had those opportunities, because, we'd have been there or thereabouts to tell you we were a good team. We worked hard. I've got some old cine footage on me, actually, when we were training on Lytham Sands in the snow during the Christmas holiday, and it's just white, and we're running up and down the sandhills and all to keep fit. And we were a good team, and like I say, I'd like to think we would definitely would be there or thereabouts. I look at some of the players today and I think, yeah, I could do that.
Fantastic. And when did you first hear about Kerr's Ladies as you were growing up?
I can remember, I've got this memory of being on the park playing with the lads, and some passers-by, they stood when they were watching us, and I heard this guy say, "She's good, she should be playing for Kerr Ladies." I didn't know what it meant, but there was always this, that if you came from Preston, you sort of knew that there was a women's football team, and they were quite good. But I'd never met anybody or seen any, it was just like a legend, a myth, if you will. And then I met my first Kerr Ladies player, Brenda Eastwood, and that gave me the idea of trying to organise a reunion. So that's what I set about to do in 1992 for the Preston Guild celebrations as part of our football tournament, the Lancashire Trophy. So, put an appeal in the local paper and got, quite a few replies. And we, organised the first ever reunion in August 1992. And it was through meeting them that I realised what a big story it was. Because the first one at Ladies I went to see, she showed me a picture of the team, and they were playing football in a field in Kirkham in the 1950s. And I couldn't believe how many people were at touchline watching them. It were amazing, because nobody came to watch us. I've got loads of pictures of me, and there's nobody there. So I said, how did this happen? What's all that about? So the more I found, talk to people, the more I realised that something needed to be done, because it would have been lost. Nobody would know who these women were. Never mind. I mean, yeah, they'd still have known that there was a team called the Kerr Ladies. Well, whoopee-doo. But they wouldn't have known who Lily Parr was, for example, or Flo Redford, Alice Kell, Jenny Harris, all of those great players. But I tell you, Sue, everything, it all fell into place. Like I said, I left school at 15. I don't know anything about writing books or anything. And I can remember being really scared because once you say you're going to do something, you got to see it through, haven't you? And I can remember talking to this lass, telling her I was scared. She said, Gail, if you don't do it, nobody will.
Your duty almost, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I felt guided. Honestly, I was driving all over Northwest, trying to, interviewing people and talking to them. And I, with no sat-navs or anything, I would be driving down these roads and trying to find where I was going. And I can remember going over to Manchester and just looking to the side. And there was the road that I needed to go down. And everything just fell into place. And then somebody had tell me something. And I think, oh yeah, and I interviewed them all and I recorded all my interviews, and then I'd go along and see the next person, and they tell me the next bit, and it was just like I was being guided. Honest to God, I wasn't doing it on my own. I couldn't have done it on my own, and they still guide me today.
Can I take you back to that then? Can you delve into a little bit of that history? Because I think, obviously, you know the story better than anyone, and I feel I've researched it, but many people don't. So could you sort of set the scene for us as to what was happening in the world at the time with Kerr Ladies?
They were working in a munitions factory in Preston during the First World War, making shells, for all the armed services. And women's football was growing up and down the country during the war. The league programme was suspended and women were playing football really as part of the war effort to raise money for soldiers and people that were affected by the war. And the Kerr Ladies got into that in 1917. And they played the first match to raise money for the soldiers of the local hospital, Moor Park Military Hospital, which grew to be really one of the biggest military hospitals in the country, and it was really very important. And lads were being treated there from the Somme and all that. So they would have been there when the girls decided to get this game together. So on Christmas Day 1917, they played the first match to raise money for the Moor Park Hospital, and 10,000 people came to watch them. I mean, yeah, there's the novelty thing, of course, because, that would have been so. But they all came along and supported the team, and they just grew from strength to strength. And throughout 1918, they played, most of the home games were played at Preston North End. And then, of course, there was the armistice and peace descended upon the land. But they carried on playing because people still needed lots of money to be raised for the wounded soldiers. And when they came home as well, they called it shell shock then, but it'd be PTSD today, wouldn't it? These lads were in such distress.
I had no idea how much money they'd raised. I knew they'd raised some money, but I had no idea of the vast sums. So how much did they raise across the whole period of playing?
It would be in excess of £10 million today. I've been revisiting it because I'm working on a children's book with the University of Central Lancashire and putting the into context today what they raised. And in 1920 it was several million, and in 1921 again it was even more because they played 67 games of football throughout 1921. And if you're averaging about £1,000 per match, then. So it's a hell of a lot of money when you work it all out.
And as you say, it was needed at a time because I guess the charities were a bit oversaturated in terms of the need that was there. And I believe some of the players lost their loved ones during the war. So do you think that affected their reasons for playing?
Yeah, of course it would. I mean, it touched everybody in one way or another. I mean, some of the girls lost their own brothers and others lost... like this sister had married a soldier and they were killed before the child was born, and all of those things. Did all of that to face. So when you put that into context as well, you realise just what amazing people they were, because it must have been so hard for them, having lost the brother or the whatever relative, and wanting to give something back in any way that they could.
And can you tell us about Alfred Franklin? So he kind of got it started for the girls in the first place, do you feel?
I don't think it was him that got it started for the girls. He sort of got involved as manager. I think he had a flair for organisational skills and all of that. They got started initially in October of 1917. They had a challenge match with the lads in the factory yard.
Oh, right.
And the lads team, I don't know who they were playing, but they'd lost several games, and the girls were giving them some stick, saying, we could play better than you. And the lads were a bit miffed, their pride was hurt. So they said, right, well, we'll challenge you to a proper match then. And Grace Sibbett took up this challenge and got the girls together. Okay. And they played just on a field in Penwitham somewhere near the factory. Nobody knows the result. We'd like to think that the girls won, but, nobody really knows. And so she is credited with it, although she didn't take any further part due to ill health, which is a shame. But without her inspiration, there might never have been a Dick Kerr Ladies. And Alfred Franklin came along when they were getting the team going. Somebody needed to be at the helm, and he was probably a member of the sports and social club that they had, and he took the job on and was with them throughout the history after that.
And can you tell us now about those extraordinary crowds? So that's the thing that I guess we're hearing more and more about. But who were the spectators that came along to watch them play?
Well, it was phenomenal, really. It just grew and grew and grew. And I can remember interviewing a guy. He was in his 90s then, and they played a night match at Deepdale. I don't know if you've seen the footage.
I have.
Yeah. Well, that was done to raise money for the lads again. But I met a guy that was actually at that game, and I asked him, why did you go to watch the Dick Kerr Ladies? And the answer was, we wanted to see a good game of football. There was no wanting to see women in shorts or anything, gender specific. They wanted to see a good game of football. And the guy that actually went to the night match, he could even remember the name of the captain. And he said he thought she was the best player on the team. That was Alice Kell. And to remember her name after all those years, it spoke volumes to me. It was just amazing. So they were a good football team, and I think people respected them for that and for why they were playing.
And what size crowds had the men's teams had before this amazing factory team of women came along to play? When
the first division teams like your Manchester United and all that, they would have obviously had bigger crowds, but when the French team came over in 1920 and they played at Deepdale, and they had a crowd of 25,000 come on, there'd never been a crowd that big on Preston North End before. So they really did attract the crowds. And then we have the biggest one, of course, at Goodison Park on Boxing Day 1920 with 53,000 crammed into the ground and between 10 and 14,000 locked out, unable to get in. So when you put that into perspective with no Twitter, no Facebook, no media, it's phenomenal. It blows you away, doesn't it? Absolutely blows you away.
Absolutely. I love the pictures, the images, and you said the lovely Pathé newsreels and so on. So what were the women wearing, to describe them in terms of their play? What was their kit like in those days?
Well, I think they wore black and white striped jerseys. Shorts were like sky blue and black and white socks. But they had to wear hats. And everybody says, why did they have to wear hats? And that's because everybody had long hair during that time, and they weren't allowed to wear hair grips or hairpins or anything when they were playing. So they had to wear a hat to put the hair in. And that's the only reason that they were wearing them. So they wore the hats. It was into the mid-20s before they stopped wearing the hats.
Oh, we've got the bands now, haven't they?
Yeah.
And was it good for the profile of Dick Kerr and company? Almost like an early form of sports sponsorship, really, in terms of their profile?
Absolutely, it was, yeah. They sponsored the French team coming over in 1920, but there was, in the minutes at the meeting in 1924, it was documented that the football team was more well known than the company. So they did appreciate the fact that they were spreading the name of the Dick Kerr company throughout the world, really.
Excellent. And you mentioned there, we alluded to the game Under the Searchlight. So can you tell us a little bit more about how that came about?
Yeah, there was a committee set up in Preston specifically to raise money for the lads, who were unemployed, who couldn't get work and stuff. So they had this discussion, and they came up with this idea of playing a match at night, which of course they didn't have floodlights. No. So they approached the War Office for the loan of anti-aircraft searchlights to illuminate the pitch. And they were placed at either end of the ground, but it was Winston Churchill who gave permission for the searchlights to be used. And there were quite a few amusing incidents during the game. You know, the lights would go out, and then Jenny Harris, who was the smallest player on the team, nobody could find her at one point during the darkness until a cameraman set off a flashbulb. They'd get so enthralled with the play, they'd blind the players with the searchlights, you know, because they were following them, you know, so that everybody could see them. And an interesting fact as well, probably the first white football in history, Bob Holmes, who was one of the Preston North End Invincibles, he could be seen on the touchline whitewashing the brown footballs and throwing him on regularly so that everybody could see the ball from all parts of the arena. So it's probably the first white football in history.
And at the time, and many people felt, as you've alluded to, that women shouldn't be playing sport at all. Did all the women find they were supported by their families, or was that not the case?
A lot of them were, yeah. I talked to Alice Kell's family, and she was a great player. I would put her on a mould of Bobby Moore, you know, how everybody, reveres him and what a great defender he was. Alice Kell was like that, and she grew up playing football with her brothers, and her family were always very, very proud of her, always very supportive. Some of the girls, though, their parents or whatever didn't want them to play, but they did anyway, you know. So...
I think Molly Walker, I read in the book, I think.
That's right, yeah. Her boyfriend's family didn't like her wearing shorts and showing her legs, but she didn't get any notice either. She carried on playing, you know.
I love that. Was the attitude of them, really, wasn't it? Carry on anyway.
Yeah.
So I guess moving on to the sadder part of the story almost, how did the FA react to this incredible success? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. In 1921, 5th of December 1921, the FA banned women's football, and they said they hadn't to play on league grounds anymore, that it was dangerous sport for women, it could affect their fertility, all of these kind of things. And that was it, you know, for 50 years, women's football was in the wilderness. I think, you know, it's just my opinion, but I think the Goodison match was the turning point, really.
Almost,
yeah. I think that, you know, we can't have that 53,000 because, you know, it's the second biggest recorded, or it was at the time, the second biggest recorded crowd since records began in 1888. Manchester United, I think, played Manchester City a day or two before, big local derby, and I think there was 63,000 there or something. But if Goodison could have fit all the people in, it would have been the biggest. I think that was the turning point, really. And throughout 1921, there were, you know, trouble was brewing, and there were people questioning it, all the money, and was it going to the right places? And the FA made it increasingly more difficult for clubs to let them use the grounds. They wanted a statement of accounts, or they had to ask permission, first of all, before they let them play. And there were loads of obstacles being put in the way. But of course, in 1920, the Football League was expanded. It was practically doubled with the new Division 3. So they couldn't have all those spectators going to watch women's football, could they? They needed them to populate the other games, you know, further down the league. So you can see, looking back, probably, you know, well, we all know what the real reasons were, don't we? And we're still fighting in lots of ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. And did they keep on playing, though? So they were banned from playing on FA pitches, and I know hard to get referees, etc. But they did keep on playing.
They did. The Kerr Ladies carried on through until 1965. They had a break during the Second World War, but this is what makes them more special. Apart from them being, you know, when in their heyday, the best team, the fact that they carried on, and most of the others just fell by the wayside. And in fact, many of the times in the matches when they were playing after the ban, they would provide the opposition as well. You know, so it might be Dick Kerr Ladies versus the rest of Lancashire. Well, they were really all part of the same club. So they carried on right through till 1965. So that does make them a lot more special than anybody else, because nobody else carried on.
Absolutely. And how long did the ban last for? When was the ban stopped?
Well, 50 years, 1921. They reckon officially 1971, but Pat Gregory will argue that it was 1969 when they sort of like said, OK. But it wasn't until UEFA really came in and said, no, look, you've got to give women the opportunity, that they agreed rather reluctantly to rescind everything. But it's taken a long time when you look back and think, you know, how long it's taken to get to where we are. So, yeah, we've still got a bit of catching up to do.
And what do you think might have happened if the women's game had been allowed to grow at the same rate as men's and top women given the same status?
I think still needed somebody like Billie Jean King. We would definitely have needed a Billie Jean King because that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So if we'd have had a Billie Jean King, I think, we'd have done okay. But they're all ifs and ands, aren't they? We'll never know.
No.
We can only, but I do think if they hadn't abandoned us, that we would have needed somebody to say, hang on a minute, and go out there flag waving and whatever, so yeah.
And then in 1922, they went off to the US and Canada.
That's right. Yeah, they went to yeah. So that was a big adventure for them. But they were told before they went that there were all these women's teams to play against, and then when they got there wasn't any women's teams. They had to play against men. But they did okay. They played 9 games. They won 3, drew 3, and lost 3. So they gave a good account of themselves, and the guys were really impressed with this skill. Yeah.
Do you think that tour sparked some of the development we've seen in women's football or soccer in the US at that time?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that they were an inspiration. Again, we don't know. We can only imagine. But yeah, I know that a lot of women did go to watch the matches, and maybe it did inspire them. I think there's sort of I don't know of any properly documented stuff, but there's rumours that women did start playing after that in America. So it'd be nice to think that the Kerr Ladies were the trailblazers out there as well.
Absolutely. And one of the players, Alice Mills,
yeah, she
fell in love with the US.
Yeah, she did. She was so enamoured with it. She didn't want to come back to Preston, and they couldn't find her on the ship before they were going to leave. They had to send Traveller's Aid to go and bring her back. And she vowed that one day she'd return to make a new life. And she did. The very next year, she left Preston on her own and travelled out there and settled, got married, had 6 daughters. So that kicks the fertility thing out the window, doesn't it?
Almost a football team, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm really good friends with all the family. This is the main thing. It's been wonderful what this, it's changed my life. And I've been out to stay with the daughters and we're still in touch with them today. They're still all alive at the moment. So Alice had a good life, and it's wonderful that she grew up just down the road from me as well, which is amazing. And I'd pass by the house where she was born every day when I was going to school. And I was christened at the same church as her as well, which is, and it just thinks I've walked in all the footsteps. Alice Kell, the first ever captain of the team, she was christened at the church school that I went to when I was a kid. It's just, they just always round where I grew up. I think it was meant to be that I was the one to come and tell this story because I lived so close to it,
Absolutely. And through all that time of their playing, they were still working in the factory, weren't they? And it must have been a hard, tough life as well for them at the time.
Yeah, sure. They didn't get time off. If they were playing like at weekend, they still had to do the shift. And Alice Norris, who she played for them in the early 20s, she said to me, "I were proud to be a Dick Kerr's girl. It were worth all the effort we put in." So it was hard, and I got a lot of stories from Alice to be able to tell, the true story of the team. So yeah, they were tough ladies. They were tough ladies. But then so were we. I worked full time, trained twice a week, played on a Sunday.
Absolutely. And they were finally awarded a blue plaque in 2017, I think. So is Preston very proud of its team?
It's more so now, yeah. They always have been, but now that there's this, I see it on Facebook quite a bit. People go into it, and I'm so proud because I worked so hard to get that plaque for them, and it's the first in the world for women's football. And it's fortunately the factory is still there. Well, the building is. It's not a working factory anymore. But yeah, I love to see it, and everybody wants their relative to have played for the team. I get people send me pictures all the time. Is this the Kerr Ladies or what? Whatever. But yeah, they are more so now, and the memorial at Preston North End as well that we got unveiled the same year for the centenary. It's just a wonderful thing to finally get the recognition for them, and that's what I've wanted all my life, is for them to have that recognition, and now it's there for forever. It'll be long after I've gone, it'll be there, and that's what it's all about.
So you wrote this fantastic book, which I have here, In a League of Their Own, and I've read. It's absolutely brilliant. So what do you think it was that sparked that desire in you to tell the story? Can you remember a moment when you thought, it's down to me to tell this story?
Yeah, it was seeing that first photograph. And the next lady I went to see, she showed me some newspaper clippings from the Daily Herald of 1946. And I just thought that something's got to be done here, because being a footballer myself and nobody interested in us, we were lucky if we could get a referee and all of that kind of, the Lancashire FA didn't support us. It was hard. It was, to get your game on a Sunday. And I just thought somebody's got to do something. And I just, it had to be me, because who else would have done it? I think it's the love of football, and I can't be doing with injustice. And it was a great injustice, and people needed to know. And given, the huge success, the amount, and nobody really realised how much they raised or what they'd done. And it just needed to be told. And I'm still, there's still more to tell. You've got that, there's every time I think that's it now, there's something else comes along, and I think I've got to leave as complete a record as possible before I go, because I know how important it is to families to see their relatives' name. So I'm working on as many team lineups as I can for each match, and all of that, so that they know when they played, they know when they scored, and I, as I say, I want to leave as complete a record as possible.
On the website, I love that page that has all the it's very moving, actually, wasn't it? It had all the Kerr ladies that have played at different times. That was very powerful to see. How many of the original players were you able to meet in person?
Well, obviously not very many from the early days, because they'd all passed away. But I feel like I know them.
Their families.
They're never so far away. But I met Joan Morley. We were great friends, me and Joan Morley. She played football with Tom Finney. They grew up together playing football, and I think Tom wouldn't have been as good without Joan, and Joan wouldn't have been as good without Tom. I think, they helped each other a lot when they were kids. Joan Burke, just loads of people, but they all deserve to be remembered. But Joan Morley as well, particularly, because I call them the second generation. Joan was great friends with Lily Parr, and she told me a lot about Lily Parr and lots of the other players as well. But even the ones that I never met, I can look at a picture and I know who they are.
Yeah. You feel like you know them too. And how did those players and their families react when they heard that you were going to be telling their story and gathering that together?
They were really pleased. I can remember talking to Edna Sibbert, who was Grace Sibbert's daughter, and that was an exclusive. Nobody knew anything about Grace Sibbert at all before, and I just thought they wanted these things to be known. But it's like yourself, you don't think that what you're doing is important. And then a lot of the times these women, they played football, but they didn't talk about it after. And so, or if they did, kids don't take any notice, do they? My granddad fought in Gallipoli in the First World War, but I used to think, he's just an old man. What are you talking about the war for? But I give me right arm to listen to him now. And we don't realise, what we when we're younger. So, I don't think they realised just how important it was. But the families are thrilled now. I mean, like whenever we have functions now, Grace Sibbert's grandson, David, he comes. And it was Grace Sibbert's grandson and Alice Kell's granddaughter that unveiled the blue plaque for me.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to give that back to them so that they can get that pride in their family, because they knew that they might have played, but they don't know anything about them. So it's nice that I can tell them these things. I can remember one time there were a load of us together. 2005, there was a women's football conference. First one at University of Central Lancashire, and Sue Thurl from the BBC had come up, and we were all sat round together having this meal. And Sue Thurl said to Titch, Joan Burke, one of the players, she said, "And when did you start playing, Titch?" Well, she said, "I don't know. Ask Gail; she'll tell you." And that's really how it is. It's all up here in my head, and you say somebody's name, and I'll think, oh, yeah, they played in the 20s, or they played in the 30s, or wherever, and it's just there.
It's a beautiful story I heard about Titch's funeral, and you're singing the club song.
Yeah, that was lovely. And giving them that as well. I can remember they'd asked me to do the eulogy at Titch's funeral, so I'd do that. But I went to see the priest at the church, and I said, they had a club song, can we sing it in the church? And he said, "Oh yeah, that of course you can." You know, I'm getting emotional now thinking about it. So I got up and did the eulogy, and then they sang the club song, and then we went to the cemetery for the burial afterwards. And he asked, "Oh, I'm filling up again."
Oh,
he asked sorry. He asked us to sing it at the graveside.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. Take a moment. Take a moment. It's just so powerful, though, isn't it? It meant so much to them. And then I guess for me, I think it is about the families, isn't it? It's about their sons and daughters and their grandchildren knowing
and they can be proud of thinking, because these women, I never think of them as old women. Even when I met Joan, she was like in her 70s or whatever, and they were never old women to me. We were just footballers together, and that's how I think of them all now. And Jessie Walmsley, she played in the 20s, and she died quite young, did Jessie. She's quite a hero as well. She was commended for bravery in 1917. There was an explosion at the White Lund factory, munitions factory in Lancaster, and Jessie was ushering people to safety and stuff. Anyway, I knew she was buried in Lancaster. I knew she died early, and I wanted to go and find her grave. So on Christmas Day, just this Christmas gone, I went up to Lancaster. Well, it's a long story. It took me too long to tell you it all. But I eventually found the grave, and it was leant over, you know, at 45-degree angle, and it was full of ivy, and it was you couldn't read it. It was awful. And I looked at it and I thought, I can't leave it like that. I can't. So I got in touch with the vicar at the church, and I explained who she was and could I do something, you know, to get the gravestone made good. Anyway, with a lot of little, they did. And it looks fabulous. And on the bottom, I paid for the extra letters to go on. And it says, Kerr Ladies, women's football pioneer, 1918 to 1922. And I just think people will see that now.
Yeah, forever.
You know? Yeah. So, and it's just great. You wouldn't believe it would say Medstone, honestly. I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
It's beautiful. And that's just that, you know, it's just, it'll be there another 100 years, hopefully. But on Boxing Day this year, right, it's the centenary of the Goodies match, which we were meant to be having a fantastic dinner, which is all obviously is Corona malarkey. It's gone by the by. But on Boxing Day, I'll have to go to St Helens, to Lily Parr's grave and take her a wreath, and then drive up to Lancaster to Jessie's grave to take her a wreath, because they both played in that match, you know.
Oh, we should all raise a toast on that day.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I heard that there was talk of a film being made about the book at some point, which would be extraordinary. You're flown out to California to talk about it, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Is that still in progress? Is that something?
It is, but not with the California thing. Sue Horth, an independent film producer, BAFTA winning, she's got the rights, and they are working on it. It's in development as we speak, but of course COVID's come along, and you know, we were looking maybe of being 2021 for the anniversary, you know, centenary of the ban, and so I don't know, you know, but it is still in development, and you know, we've had lots of meetings and talking, and in fact, we've become really quite close, you know, and I trust them. I've had such this journey has been, you know, there's been a lot of tears, people wanting to rip you off and all sorts of shafting and whatever. But I really trust these people. So I don't worry when I don't hear from them. I know that everything will be fine. And that as soon as there's anything to tell me, they will. Because as I always say, it's not my story. It's their story. That's all I want. I want them to tell their story.
Does it ever frustrate you that there's still not enough knowledge about their story?
Yes and no, because it's more and more people are wanting to know now. So, you know, and that's great. And this technology, I mean, there's kids in America that do history projects, and they'll get in touch with me. So I've spoken to kids in New York and in California, and you know, it's nice that it is getting out there more, and eventually everybody will know. So and that'll be great. But like I said, there's a bit more to tell, and I'll be glad to be able to get that done as well.
And reading about it in your book, it did make me really angry. Do you think the women felt angry at the time when the ban happened, or were they excited to keep playing?
No, they were angry. Of course they were angry, and they were disappointed. You know, they would have been hurt. You know, they'd done all that work, and you know, people who were appreciating them and supporting them then turned against them. So, you know, we all know how that must have felt. And I can only put myself in their shoes and think, you know, how angry they must have been, but how bloody determined they would have been to carry on, you know, as well, which they proved.
And do you think the FA is still embarrassed today about what happened?
I think they appreciate the thing. And there's some good people at the FA, and they've been very good to me and very, very supportive. Baroness Sue, well, Dame Sue that she is now, love her to bits.
Absolutely.
Rachel Pavlo, you know, they're wonderful people, and they support everything. And when you talk about the FA, I don't want to say anything about those people.
Absolutely.
But the FA still could do you know, I think, why not embrace this story? Nobody in the world has got this history. Why not embrace that and make more of it and say, this is what we've got in this country, blah, blah, blah. Nobody else has got this, and celebrate it. Shout it from the rooftops. All right, say, well, we made a mistake, we banned them, but blinking heck, we love them now.
And we're making amends for it now.
Yeah. They could do that, but, you know, Baroness Sue, as I say, and Rachel and all those others, they were coming to this dinner as well.
Kelly
again.
Simmons and all that. They're doing an amazing job.
Yeah. They're not the FA to me. You know what I mean, don't you? Although Baroness Sue is head of it all, but lovely lady. Yeah.
And she was a guest on this podcast too, and she was.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Amazing woman.
Yeah.
So just finally, I guess, what do you feel we can learn from the Kerr Ladies and all that they personally went through?
I just think the message is never give up, isn't it? You know, go for your dreams, never give up, because that's exactly what they did. And although I don't think they ever thought that they would have got the recognition that they've got now, I think they deserve something. And the message to me is to inspire and go for your dreams and just never give up. And I think they'd be happy with that.
What an absolutely wonderful woman Gail is, and I'm sure we'll all be feeling very inspired after hearing about the Kerr Ladies. Thanks again to Barclays for supporting this series of The Game Changers, and to Sam Walker from What Goes On Media, who's executive producer for the podcast. You can find out more about all of my guests from this and the previous series at fearlesswomen.co.uk. Other guests include Jessica Ennis-Hill, Katie Stoney, Tanny Gray-Thompson and Chrissy Wellington. You can also listen on the website, or the podcast is available in all the usual places, including Apple, Spotify, Google and Acast. You can get in touch on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at Sue Anstis or at The Game Changers. Next week, it's a fascinating conversation with Scotland manager Shelley Kerr.
And in one respect, I think it shouldn't have been like that, because I was a person that, you know, regardless of gender, had the skill set to do the job. The interview panel had faith in me that I could do the job. So why was it a big story? But it was, and it was absolutely unbelievable.
The Game Changers. Fearless women in football.